Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And in the evening and the morning were the first day.
Good morning. Or good afternoon. It's 20 minutes to 12, so I'll just go ahead and have a closing prayer. No, we just didn't set the clocks back yet. Before I do the sermon, I just want to do a real quick commercial break. I had somebody on TikTok say, "Call me." I'm like going, "Who are you?" And he gives me his phone number. And then this 6 o'clock this morning, he said, he didn't say his name, he just said what he owns. And it's this place called Bible Adventureland. Bible Adventureland is exactly what we were going to do originally in the year 2000 with Bible Land Studios. Not on such a large scale, though, and he's not doing it on a large scale. It's in Massachusetts. Apparently, it's right over the border from New York into Massachusetts. He's purchased the building. It's a 2,000 square foot building, and he's terraforming it. He's transforming it into a Bible history of the flood and Babel, and he's creating this all on his own. He even did a 9'9" Goliath. And he doesn't have he's trying to figure out where to set it up because it's too big for the building. He's thinking about raising the roof in one part to have him in there. And he's got a sword, excellent. If he's not open yet, but he'll be open soon. But if you just want to get him on your radar, again, it's BibleAdventureland.com, I guess. And his name is Ivan. He's from the Ukraine. And I spoke to him this morning at length, and we had a really great time. And so I just thought I'd share that with you. So, regarding the scripture that we just read, there is a loud voice out there in the world that is very well capitalized. They have free reign of the lines of communication and entertainment and colleges and high schools and middle schools, and that is the evolutionary proposition. And it undermines what we have just read. The two do not coexist, although there is a small faction, that tries to put them together. It's called Old Earth creationists. It's not very popular. Let me put it that way. I run polls on my YouTube site, and it's interesting. I understand that I may attract a certain group of people, but with the hashtags and the keywords and the tags that I use, it encourages other groups of people to come. I'm always using hashtag evolution, always hashtag science, always hashtag geology. So I get a mixture of people, and we did a poll, and we asked them, how old is coal? And I gave them two answers. 4,500 years ago, worldwide flood. 300 million years ago, modern geology. 58% of the people said, what do you think? 58% said what? The flood. Which a couple of comments said this is very concerning. That high of a percentage, and there were 1,100 people that voted, and 58% said worldwide flood, 4,500 years. Isn't that interesting? When we approach the subject of determining the age of the earth, there are two worldviews that are vying for your attention. One is, I'm just going to call it religion or creationism, that pegs the creation date of Adam and Eve using Bishop Ussher's chronology at 4004 BC. Science, or that small section of science where worldviews and which includes evolution and the modern geology, basically say that the Earth is 4.51 billion years old and that life started as a proto-RNA some 3.5 billion years ago. The ultimate answer is going to be based on, believe it or not on necessarily facts or evidence, as it is with which worldview you begin with. We were on TikTok this morning live, my wife and I, and we were discussing this topic, and there was somebody by the name of True to Science who was debating or intersecting with thoughts and whatnot. And Kristen piped up and she said, look, and she's kind of said this before, you don't own the fact column. The fact column is sovereign from any worldview. You have strata, you have basic other evidences, and what she said, whatever worldview you see these through is going to come to a different conclusion. Of course, what did he say, Kristen? I can't remember some of his. Hurting children, by the way. Hurting children. And he's not the first one who has said that, but when the first time I heard that, I'm like going, okay, great. Hurting children. He's just repeating something that he's heard others, skeptics, say. And may I add, I have recently when I go live, warning people out there of skepticism. Skepticism is not just something to be proud of. It is a disease that literally is proliferating the whole world. The reason why the internet is so interesting is because I would never get into a conversation with someone about worldviews, evolution, creation. All the years that I've been a Christian, since '84, I typically never get into a discussion about that. But with the internet and the platforms and the conversations you can have with comments and leaping off of a blog post or a video mostly these days, you get to hear what people are thinking inside. And a lot of the feedback that we get is not very pleasant. You have the skeptic that isn't very well educated. God bless them, they're not educated. So they'll say something like, you're an idiot, or it's a fairy tale, or some kind of very short and, whatever, and I can't even have a discussion with it. Then you get the intellectuals, on the other hand, that use intellectualism to try to sound like, to try to bully, really, to try to sound, very, very intelligent, which they probably are, but they'll use lots of big words in order to be able to articulate their position. It's nothing more than to sound superior. And the arrogance and the belittling that comes from this group, if you want to say, whatever minority or majority they are, is disturbing, quite honestly. It isn't just once or twice. It's hundreds, it's thousands and thousands of comments that we get on TikTok and YouTube, and just on our little sphere of influence, Skepticism, it's rampant. There are two books that you can begin your journey to creating a worldview. And let me just see what I have here. And go ahead and, 1 second here. One is the Bible, and the other one is the Principles of Geology. Principles of Geology was written by Charles Lyell, and we'll get to him in just a second. But those are the two books, the Bible and the 1830 book, Principles of Geology. That's the book that started it all. That's the book that Charles Darwin read over and over again when he was on the Beagle, when he went overseas and started thinking in terms of living evolution, platforming off of geological uniformitarianism. There's a $3 word for you. And uniformitarianism, by the way, folks, only means that what we see around us has been going on for billions of years. And that is punctuated, maybe once in a while we'll see a catastrophe, but pretty much the ebb and flow of just accretion and erosion, meaning that things are just kind of stacking up slowly and they're eroding slowly. And once in a while we'll get a flood or we'll get an earthquake, but generally speaking, everything is nice and slow and even keel as far as the topography and the geology. And that's what Charles Lyell invented or postulated. Before we explore what they wrote and see some telling artifacts, which I'll show you at the very end, so that you all stay here for the whole sermon, okay? I'm going to show you first a gentleman. Go ahead, Lisa. I'm going to show you a gentleman by the name of Niels Bohr, B-O-H-R. And she'll get that up there in just a second. And while she's doing that, I'll just say that Niels Bohr was a Nobel Prize winner in 1922. He was born in 1885, died in 1962, and he was in the field of physics, quantum physics, atomic theory. Does he qualify at all in the minds of people to be able to say anything about anything and at least be respected? The answer is absolutely yes. The man was brilliant. But interestingly enough, when it comes to the dating of rock, this is kind of intellectual, and I hope to be able to get it up on the screen so you can read it. I'll repeat it twice. It's difficult to wrap your mind around, at least it was for my pea brain. But this is what he said. When we measure something, so imagine a rock in my hand. When we measure something, we are forcing an undetermined, undefined worldview. Do you need something? Yes, sure. Show this up on the screen. Well, and I'll explain to you what it's saying, but let me quote him first. When we measure something, we are forcing an undetermined, undefined world to assume an experimental value. In other words, we don't know how old it is, and when we state it is, we're defining it as we see fit, as we put an age on it. Meaning that there is no indicator how old the world is. There is no indicator how old rock is. As much as a geologist will tell you that there is. How do they date it? Sure. They'll use radiometric dating. They'll use carbon-14 if it's under 50,000 evolutionary years. Or they will say that the fossil dates the strata, and the strata dates the fossils. They call it circular reasoning. So a combination of these things, and they come up with billions of years. In the framework of that, we have to fit everything else. That's the idea, but Niels says something very, very telling. Go ahead with the next slide. Oh, okay, hold that right there, but Niels again says, when we measure something, we are forcing an undetermined, undefined world to assume an experimental value. We are not measuring the world, we are creating it. Let's wrap your mind around that a little bit. Let's talk about modern geology. Where did it all start? Did it start with Charles Lyell? Actually, it didn't. It started with this man right here. And his name is Georges, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this in French, but Georges Buffon. And he wrote the book, Natural History. And let me see if I got a picture of that. Yeah, next slide. He wrote Natural History, General and Particular, Earth, General and Particular. That's the English version. Listen, I'm not trying to boast, but I'm going to just a little bit. I own a copy from 1780, and it was very expensive. But I wanted to own this book because this is the book that started it off in 1780. Here is the man who, because of the way iron cools, he postulated that the earth is 75,000 years old. He believed it was older, but he couldn't prove it scientifically. But he understood because of metals and how they cool and everything, and I don't know the whole formula to get to that place, but that's what he said. Ironically enough, and listen to this will make complete sense. Next slide, please. 1780, okay? What takes place soon after that. You've got the French Revolution, 9 years later after he writes the book. Why is that so significant? The French Revolution, in part, was this idea of trying to get away from the standard norm of government and religion. They were trying to throw everything out, the baby, the bathwater, everything, and start over. The Catholic Church had created such a repressive situation with the church-state proposition or relationship going on. And the way that government was conducted on top of that, they just wanted to get rid of it all. So the French Revolution takes place, and Buffon is writing this book just shortly before that. What did they do to religion? They got rid of it. In France, they got rid, have you heard of the Notre Dame, the cathedral at Notre Dame? They denuded it of all Catholic symbols, all statues, all crosses, and they set up this Diana, the goddess of reason. They wanted to stay so far away from the Catholic proposition that they wouldn't even erect a statue of Diana, their new goddess of reason. They wouldn't even do that. So they had some actress, some opera actress or whatever, dress up like Diana at their parties and stuff and walk around and represent her. Her meaning logic, reason. Do you know how many times on our lives or in our comments we get, prove God, prove it, come on, prove that he exists. Prove it. Well, they got rid of everything, and let me tell you something. In 1893, they set up the guillotine, and they killed a lot of people. They threw the priests out of the country, and everything. And then they decided to set up their government without God, without any respect towards God, without any respect towards anything other than their own logical reason. The Age of Enlightenment was in the process of taking place. Do you know how long that Age of Enlightenment, in its fullest, compactest, atheistic, no religion, no nothing, goddess of reason, let's use our logic, let's use our noodles, let's use reason to actuate how we live. Do you know how long it lasted? 1 year. So atheism out there, anybody who's listening to this or watching this, atheism gave it a try, and it lasted 1 year. That's all it could survive, because things even got worse. The French Revolution ended in 1799. James Hutton, next slide please. James Hutton was the next person to throw in his hat for geology, and they call him also the father of geology. He wrote a book called The Theory of the Earth in 1788. So here we go. This is the beginning point to where we have these people screaming out loud in very basic tones to very intellectual tones, the things that were laid down during this time period. Okay, next slide. And good old Charles Lyell, the father of geology. Again, he said that the earth was several 100 million years old. And he was good friends with Charles Darwin. All throughout the 19th century, so we're talking the 1800s, the age of the earth varied between 20 million years old to 400 million years old, depending on who is publishing what. But for 100 years, it fluctuated. And it didn't just progressively go up. It fluctuated up and down as it went up. In 1946, Arthur Holmes invented the radiometric dating system and said that the Earth was 3 billion years old. This was in 1946. Critics of his conclusion stated that he did not measure the age of the materials from which the Earth was formed. Well, there's critics no matter what. Let's look at the biblical worldview. Oh, by the way, let me show you the book again of Charles Lyell. And there it is right there, 1832. That's my version. The original was a 1 volume, and it was 1830. And then the next slide just shows you again Charles Darwin versus the Bible. Charles Lyell versus the Bible. It really boils down to that. 2 worldviews competing with each other. Okay, let's go to the next slide and let's bring on our hero, Moses. People sit there and I ask people, who are you going to believe? Neil deGrasse, or is it DeGrasso or Grass? He's a black scientist that's very popular in pop culture, if you want to call it right now. There's also Bill Nye the Science Guy, who's basically, from my understanding, a science actor, but he is smart and he does have science background. I just don't know what his total background is, but who cares? You don't have to have a degree in order to figure this stuff out or to engage in this. Well, here's Moses. What kind of degree did he have? Well, he had a lot of degrees. And I remind people that the person that wrote Genesis was the former commander of the Egyptian army. That's quite a resume. But that didn't do him any good. He had to unlearn all that, and he did for 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep before he wrote and conquered Egypt with a staff in his hand. He wrote Genesis in approximately 1440 BC. Our next slide. Oh, this is Bishop Ussher. He's the one that came up with the idea that the earth was created in 4004 BC. In 1654 AD. He utilized, next slide, the chronology of the Bible and pieced it together in such a way that he came up with that. There have been others that have done it, and that number does fluctuate about 1,000 years, depending on who's doing it. But nevertheless, he comes up with around. So the earth is, and I always say, just for the sake of discussion, 6,000 to 10,000 years. Life on earth and the sedimentary rock that we see, the fossils that we see, 6,000 to 10,000 years. I just say it like that. Now, how old is the original granite? Is that 4.51 billion years? Or is it 6,000 to 10,000 years? Or is it 1 trillion years old? I don't know. I don't know. I do know that it was created instantly. That I do know. We were talking about what is it, Kristen? The halos that are inside granite. And I can't teach this. I'll just give it to you piecemeal. There's an Adventist scientist by the name of Robert Gentry who wrote a book on it. It's a little bit heavy, okay? I'll just kind of warn you. But basically he said that there is a little telltale ring of decay that takes place within a microsecond. And those rings are captured. You can see them under the microscope in granite, meaning that when granite was formed and it cooled, it was instant, like microns of a second, microseconds. So anyway, he tried to put forth his paper to a state-run university forum, website, whatever, and they denied him access. Denied him access to publish his paper publicly on a publicly funded forum. I remember hearing about that in 2005. We were at GC and I met him there, and that's when I heard about that. Scientists and religionists both agree on the age of the earth, or rather, life on earth in the okay, never mind. So how did we get here? Let's see. Let's see where we're going next here. Let me just get my photos here. Okay, our next slide is Charles Lyell. See, the biblical view has beautiful uniformitarian geology for the first 1,600 years, and then massive catastrophism for about a year. Forces that we have yet to see combined and to the degree that were going on for that length of time. We'll get a little glimpse at, let's say, Mount St. Helen, or some other, the tsunami that we saw wipe out an entire, country. We see those things briefly, but the intensity for a whole year of that combined is incredible. He rejected that, like I said earlier, and anything that even tended towards that was to him anathema. Oh, there was something that I forgot. Okay. So Lyell was, and I'm going to quote, I don't know if I'm quoting him. Yes, I am quoting him, sorry. He said, he was like the spiritual savior of geology. And here's the quote for Lyle. He was involved with freeing the science from the old dispensation of Moses. He very rarely even quotes or references anything to do with creationism. They all didn't. They didn't respect Whiston and Halley and Sir Isaac Newton, who were the scientists of the 16 and 1700s. They ignored them when they started writing their propositions. But he did say, freeing the science from the old dispensation of Moses. Interesting. Go on to the next, please. So again, we see, is it uniformitarianism or is it the worldwide flood 4,500 years ago? Is it the biblical worldview or is it the atheistic worldview of modern geology and evolution? That's what it boils down to. And the next slide. All of this reactionary nonsense that was going on was a movement of independence. If we can get rid of Moses, we can get rid of the law of God. We can then go ahead and write morality as we see fit. We can go ahead and have our affairs. We can go ahead and eat, drink, and be merry and do what we want. There is no repercussions for it. There is no sin, per se. And this was the critics of evolution, the evolution that what I'm sharing with you here today is what they're saying, what was behind it. There was somebody in heaven that also espoused independence. He also said, we don't need God, follow me. We don't need laws. Why would there be a law necessary for an angel? Oh, there is laws? We don't need laws. God is holding back from you. And I don't know if you know that exact same statement, or ideal, if you want to call it that, government, was presented to Eve. God's holding back. He's not allowing you to experience things to its fullest. And you'd be better off if you listened to me. To bury Moses, as one person reinterprets what Lyle said, and allow ourselves to approach life in a way that rejects God, allows the morality to be subjective, to free ourselves from the moral law of Moses, the writer of Genesis. That's the whole thing behind this. And Charles Darwin read Lyle's book and furthered this concept, as I was saying earlier, about taking the rocks, the age of the rocks, and entering living organisms beyond that. And it was completely what they call naturalistic, meaning that it's natural, not supernatural. So I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give you one more quote too. This is not science. You can create a microwave oven, folks, without biological evolution. Ben Carson, the Seventh-day Adventist neurosurgeon, he was able to separate twins that were conjoined at the head with a very complicated operation, and he was a young earth creationist, which means that he rejected biological evolution. And I'm not talking about the kind of biological evolution that one kind morphs into its same kind, but little different within its own family. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, an amoeba that turns into this, that turns into a plant, or an amoeba that turns into a multi-celled animal that turns into an animal. We're talking about that, outside, the kinds as the Bible calls it. Science doesn't use that word. That's why we got dog kind, mankind. We are genetically in a petri. Well, there's restraints there genetically. We can express it with no hair, red hair, tall, skinny, whatever, and that's cool. But A gorilla doesn't ever become a human. That is a monkey kind. We are mankind. And as Timothy says, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. And I'll read it from another version. Turn away from worldly and godless chatter with its profane empty words and the contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. Prove there's a God. Show me the evidence. That's what you'll hear. Don't even try. There is no proof. There is no evidence like they're defining it that they want. It doesn't exist, so that you're then basically befuddled. But I'll tell you, they are us. You know what I mean? They just have a different way of looking at things. I'm going to show you a few artifacts regarding the fast formation of rock, and I'll let you go ahead and evaluate these as you see fit. And why don't you go ahead and show number 1, or letter A. That is a spark plug in a conglomerate. Now, one can argue that, oh yeah, sure, that's fast forming, and it sure is. That's a spark plug that's no more than 40 years old. It was found in California on the side of a cliff by the ocean. They were digging in the side of the cliff looking for what he told me 9 million year old whale bones. So obviously this spark plug made it into the ocean. It started to leach the iron, which probably had something to do with I'm going to call it coagulation of the rock and the sand that produced rock, a conglomerate, and then threw it into the cliff. That's probably what happened, and then they dug it out. Second, let's go to B. This right here is more or less, since they don't have, this was found in 1912 at a power station. Now this is a replica of the original. And the original cup, iron cup, which was found in coal, is at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. I've held the cup, and we can only take the word of 2 men that were there in 1912. They said that they had an overly large piece of coal. They broke it open, the cup fell out. They never saved the 2 pieces. I wish they did. So he felt so strongly that 20, 30 years later, he signed an affidavit stating that it was true. Now, people can run with that and criticize that very easily, of course. We're taking the word of 2 men. An iron cup should not be in coal, since coal, according to the assigned age, is 300 million years approximately. That means either that humans, if this is true, that either humans are 300 million years old, or they've got their timetables messed up. If that is 4,500 years old, and that cup was found, which I believe it was, and it is, then that cup could have come from the iron and brass shop of Tubal-Cain. Because 5,500 years ago, they were creating iron and brass artifacts. That perfectly lines up with the creation model. Next one. How long does stalactites and stalagmites take to form? That Coke bottle on the bottom was in France. It's a French Coke bottle, and we had them put it under their calcite bath. There's a place where they do this for gifts and whatnot. It's a natural springs place, and they put that Coke bottle underneath their running calcite bath, so to speak, natural, and within 5 weeks, go ahead to the next, 5 weeks, it brought on, I don't know if you can see that very well, approximately 5 millimeters of calcite stuck to that bottle. Now, critics of this will say, yeah, but John, it's drip, drip, dripping. This is lots of water flow. True, and it does matter how much minerals are in the water. If there's more minerals, it's going to do this quicker. If there's less, it's going to do it. But I say to them, look, how many of you were in those caves when there could have been a massive amount of water sloshing around for a very short period of time, and now it's drip, drip, dripping today? We weren't around. And our final 2 slides, go ahead. And this is a geode that we just purchased off of eBay. It's much more beautiful in person than it is up on the screen. There are two halves to it, and I've yet to do my research on geodes, but the question is going to be, how long does it take to create a geode? I'm sure there's going to be two answers to that question. One is going to be long periods of time. The other one is going to be, obviously, the one that says very short period of time, since we've only been here for 6,000 years. So how do you prove it? Well, here's one example of how this could be proved. And go ahead into our last slide. That's a pipe that somewhere out west had 200-degree water that went through it. And although the photo isn't great, you'll get the idea that those crystals on it are calcite crystals. And they formed within this pipe within less than a year. Less than a year. And it has some of the same look and properties as the geode, as it does also at the top where it was dripping, as you would see at Howe Cavern or Mammoth Cave or Carlsbad Cave. It's calcite. It's the formation. Very short period of time. So, I don't know what we learned here today, other than all of this all boils down to one question with two answers. Where did we come from? Is it apes, aliens, or Adam? And if it's Adam, then is Moses' account in Genesis trustworthy? I believe 1,000% that it is, and that when you stack up the evidence and put it through the lens of a creation worldview, that it all makes complete sense. Thank you.
Stand with me, please, and let's sing our closing song. This is my Father's world. 92, yes, that's all right.
Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare the Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear Him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the road seems oft so strong, God is a ruler yet. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. God reigns, let the earth be glad.
Father, thank you so much for this world. And thank you everything that it is and what it will be in the future. And I pray that you'll just bless us now as we leave here. In Jesus' name, amen.